now it is my great pleasure to introduce for the 500th time, probably, our guest today, Andrew Baumann. Ooh.
It's Halloween.
I see what you did there.
Senior partner, what the fuck are you?
Partner
At Global Strategy Group, holster of the pod, all-around good guy, halfway decent golfer, Andrew Baumann. Welcome back to the Get More Smarter podcast.
Thank you. I will take the all-around good guy and good pollster, but the halfway decent golfer is a total lie, as you well know, but I appreciate it.
Andrew bought me a shirt that says G.I. Jew, the real American Hebrew. Like, for no reason other than he saw it and thought of me. Isn't that nice? Well, let's start with the question that everybody wants to know. Where are things with the presidential race? With less than a week to go, we're recording this on Halloween. Thursday? Yeah. Thursday, October 31st. Is Kamala Harris going to win, or are we all going to be in a Trump brand gulag?
The truthful answer is I don't know. Gun to my head. I know. I wish, trust me, everybody asked me. I wish I had a clearer question for you. Gun to my head, I would say that she wins if I have to pick one or the other. But I do not feel extremely confident about that. I certainly don't feel as confident as I would like. I mean, you can see the public polls. They are similar to what we're seeing privately. It is a very close race across all 6 swing states. It is a very real possibility that she could win all 6 swing states and have an electoral college landslide, and she could lose all 6 swing states, and Trump could have an electoral. I mean, the difference here is, it's within a point or a point and a half in almost all 6 of these states. I feel better about the blue wall states, and particularly Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. A little bit more concerned about Michigan, although the early vote there is looking pretty solid. I'm not super optimistic about Arizona or Nevada for her. North Carolina, I think I'm more bullish than not that she'll definitely win, but compared to the public polling, I feel a little better there than I do in some other places, in part because of Robinson at the governor's race, but just also the data I've seen has been a little bit better there. And I have no idea about Georgia. That's the state I feel like I had the least handle on, but it's close everywhere.
What to you is the most likely scenario whereby Kamala wins?
That she holds the blue wall states, and maybe you throw in North Carolina, but I think...
And for listeners, the blue wall states are Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin.
Thank you.
And that gets her basically to 200.
She holds the blue wall, she wins. That's all she needs. She holds those 3 states, she wins. You could sub in North Carolina, I think, for a couple of those states, but not necessarily Pennsylvania. I think if she lost Pennsylvania and won North Carolina, then it would probably come down to Nevada, which I don't feel great about. So I think the most likely scenario is she holds the blue wall states, and then anything on top of that is a bonus.
Well, we'll take it.
I'll take it too.
Let's switch to some Colorado election stuff. This week, Emerson College released a poll in the 8th Congressional District saying that essentially Yadira Caraveo, the Democrat, has roughly a 2-point lead over Republican Gabish Evans. You do some polling for Yadira Caraveo. Does this more or less match what you've been seeing?
It's pretty close. I should be clear that I consider Emerson to be hot garbage, and I wouldn't listen to anything they put out. So their methodology is very sketchy, so take that for what it's worth.
Can you just detail that a tiny little bit for us? Like, what about their methodology is
it's improved a bit, but they rely heavily on text and online panel without any live phone dialing. And listen, we use text and online panel too, but we always pair it with live phone dialing. Part of this goes back to what they used to do, which was like combine IVR with MTurk. They used to like release polls that were based on like MTurk surveys, and I'll never forget.
IVR is like automatic, like robodials and
robodialing. MTurk is like this Amazon thing where anybody in the it's like usually like grad students in India that are like taking polls. It's like this, this really yes, and.
I could see why that would be methodologically suspicious.
And I never forget. So I go to a conference most years. It's the APOR, American Association of Public Opinion Researchers. It's like the biggest pollster nerd conference, and it is my heaven. I
bet
love
that's
it.
a real fucking barn burner.
It is awesome. I love it. But I was on a panel there a couple years ago, and the guy from Emerson was like talking about this methodology and combining IVR robopolling with MTurk and like talking about it as this like revolutionary thing. And like I was just like, are you kidding? Like that's like this is just ridiculous. And so, to be fair, I think they've improved their methodology since then, but it's still not up to what I would consider the snuff. And I may be a little bit biased from that. I think that panel just scarred me for life in terms of Emerson. But in terms of the eighth, it's not too far from where we have it. I mean, it is a very, very close race, like almost a dead tie. It could go either way. And like there is a real world where the control of House of Representatives comes down to a couple of hundred votes in Colorado's 8th district.
Right. Like that's this could be the seat.
Right. So I would say for all of the listeners out there, if you want to impact things, give money, go knock on doors for Yadira, because like that in Colorado, that is the most bang you can get for your buck in terms of impacting the national political landscape. It could the actions your listeners take could seriously have a real impact on who controls the House of Representatives. And let's keep in mind, like God forbid if Trump wins, the House is the only guardrail because there will be no others. So this is really important. It's a very close race. I'd rather be us than Gabe, but it's on a razor's edge. So get out there and vote for her.
So go to caraveoforcongress.com, sign up, volunteer, donate, do everything you can, because it very well could be the entire future of the republic comes down to the 8th congressional district in Colorado. This is not an exaggeration. This is not hyperbole. This is the real thing.
Let's go back about 9, 12 months, however long we need to go back. In the 8th congressional district, has this race really moved much in either direction?
No. It's been, Yadira had a larger lead at the beginning just because Gabe was not known,
right.
But her vote share has been, we always knew that would close as his name ID got up. And so, there's been some fluctuation, obviously. Some polls looked a little better, some looked a little worse, but it's always been within a couple of points either way. And this is a district that is, Biden won it, but Harris might not win it. Like this is a district that is moving away, unlike some districts like Ian's wife's district and Jason Crow's district that maybe are continuing to move more blue. This is a district that is moving more red, so it's harder this year than it was, 2 years ago, 4 years ago. So we knew that. So like the generic ballot tilts Republican. And we've seen an uphill fight the entire way in terms of the partisanship. Not overwhelmingly, right? It's still a very winnable district. But we've had it very close throughout.
So let's switch gears. We had Adam Frisch on the show a couple weeks ago, 3rd Congressional District, which shouldn't be competitive, but because Lauren Boebert left a big smoldering crater there for Republicans, and Adam Frisch has been just a fundraising and touring the district juggernaut, he's putting this district into play. Do you think that the upset he almost pulled off against Lauren Boebert is possible this time? I mean, he only lost by 546 votes. This guy, Jeff Hurd, we call him the bread sandwich.
He calls himself the bread sandwich.
Now he calls himself the bread sandwich, which is real weird. But he has not been running like the world's best campaign. I mean, even worse fundraising numbers than Gabe-ish, which are not anything to write home about. So do you think Adam Frisch has a chance in the 3rd?
I think he has a chance. And let me first acknowledge that 2 years ago I came on your show and told you that Colorado was going to be a blue landslide. And I was right about everything except I said that Frisch had no chance.
Oh, so we've already apologized to him.
Yeah.
We'll just add yours to the pile of apologies.
On your behalf.
So and I've been on your show again, but I just feel like every time I need to acknowledge I was wrong there.
Me too.
If Boebert had remained in the 3rd, Frisch would have won. Would win, which is why she moved, right? Like her numbers are so bad. I've been skeptical. Hurd is, while he's underwhelming as a campaigner, like he's not offensive, right? And it is a Republican seat that Trump's going to win by 10 points or so, and like that's tough to overcome unless you have a Boebert, or somebody like that. Ron Hanks would have been, somebody more like in that stead, but. He's got all the money in the world. Like Hurd does not have enough money to be up on Denver broadcast, and Frisch does, and that's something like 35%, 40% of the district, right? And Frisch is running a campaign, and Hurd's not. So, do I think it's likely to happen? No, but do I think it's possible? Sure, for sure, I do.
Put your statistical analysis hat on and give us some numbers. What do you think, like percentage chance?
Percentage chance, 25%.
Okay. I've seen you go all in on bad poker hands with less than a 25%.
Oh, yes, you have.
Well, let's look at the broader majorities for House and Senate. Start in the House. We talked about the importance of the House as a potential check on Trump, but also as should Kamala win the election and Trump keeps trying to delay that, having Democrats in control of the House could be really important right away. How do you feel about the chances of Democrats having that majority?
I think Democrats are slightly favored to take the House. Though let me point out for your listeners, I think you know this, Jason. If the election should go to the House of Representatives, which it could do in a 269 to 269 tie, which is possible, it is not decided based on a vote of the House. It is decided based on a vote of the states in the House. So each delegation. So my original home state of Delaware gets the same number of votes as Colorado, and Delaware will go blue, Colorado will go blue. But even if we take the House, we're not likely to have those the majority of the delegations.
Well, but we could potentially push back on some of the other efforts.
Yes, for sure. It's still very important, but I just wanted to. And I think if Kamala wins the presidency, I think it's very likely that Democrats will take the House. I think there is a scenario where they take the House even if she loses the presidency, though it's lower. This is, again, very close. I mean, this is like, when I say slight chance, like 55% chance that Dems take the House is sort of where I have it in my head. The first thing is that we have to defend seats like Yadira's. You've got Yadira, you've got Gabe Vasquez, who's also a client of mine in New Mexico, too. You've got like Washington 3, Michigan 7, Michigan 8, Maine 2, Alaska. These are all seats that we need to defend, and if we lose many of them, let alone any, it's going to be harder to pick up the seats we need. I think we're going to pick up seats in California and New York. Like some of those we're going to win for sure. The question is how many. And then you've got seats, like in Oregon, Iowa, Pennsylvania, Arizona, New Jersey, a lot of seats that are on the map. And a lot of data looks what's interesting. If you look at, there have been some polls in Pennsylvania, like Pennsylvania 7, Pennsylvania 10, Pennsylvania 1, that look quite good for Democrats, quite good for Harris. And those are look better. If you looked at those polls, you would say the statewide numbers should be like Harris +4, +5.
Totally. I know. This is bewildering to me too. Yeah.
So the question is, it is possible, and we're seeing this in certain places. Like you look at Colorado, like Harris is going to do worse in Colorado 8 than Biden did, but that doesn't mean that she'll do worse across the state than Biden did, right? There is movement. But it also means, maybe some of the statewide polling is a little bit, too pessimistic on her, or maybe those polls are too optimistic for Democrats. It's interesting, and I wish I had I could say for sure what's going on, but it is that you definitely see Democrats at both the House and Senate level overperforming the top of the ticket, and in some of these districts, like that Scott Perry district in Pennsylvania, by significant amounts. So there are going to be districts where Democrats win that Harris loses for sure.
So the House is basically a coin flip with a slight edge to Democrats. I basically agree with that based on what I've seen and what I know. But the Senate map is about as unfavorable as it gets, with Democrats starting off losing a seat due to Joe Manchin's refusal to run again, and for being forced to defend two states that Trump won twice, Jon Tester in Montana, Sherrod Brown in Ohio. Democrats' only offensive opportunities coming in states that Trump also won twice, namely Texas and Florida. Now, I know there's a lot of hopium floating around.
Let's not forget Nebraska.
We'll get to there in a second. That's not strictly Democrat, but I want to talk about Dan Osborne too. But there is some hopium around Texas specifically. So let's talk about Colin Allred versus Ted Cruz. I mean, Ted Cruz is abhorrent. He's an indefensible politician. Like Cancun Cruz, just the way he is. I think some facial construction expert said that he has the most punchable face scientifically known to man. Does this matter? Colin Allred's
a person named Cian Ilveri.
Colin Allred, really good recruit, running a great campaign, raising an unbelievable amount of money. Is this the year we see Texas turn blue, or is it going to let us down?
I'm relatively bullish. He's an underdog. I don't, gun to my head, I don't think he's going to win, but I think the chances are in the 35-40% range that he could win. Some of the Texas presidential polls have been a lot closer than you think, and he's going to overperform the top of the ticket. Cruz is a terrible, terrible candidate, and people
and human. Let's not limit it to candidate.
I think there's a better chance we win Texas than Montana. That's for sure.
Wow.
Shit.
there's a real chance. It's less than 50%, but it's above a third, I think.
Democrats are also dumping money into Florida to help Rep. Debbie
Murkisell Powell.
Do you say Murkisell Powell?
I think that's
We're going
right.
to do the magic of editing.
She's our client, but not. So I hope
Debbie
that's right.
Murkisell Powell defeats Senator Skeletor. I mean, conflict of interest disclosed. What do you think about Florida?
Well, so to be clear, I have not seen our own polling on that. I'm
it.
firewalled away from it. So my colleagues are working on that, not me. So this is not based on any numbers that they have. I mean, before the Puerto Rico stuff, I would have said no. I mean, very possible, but low chance. But the Puerto Rico stuff, that.
Oh, you insulting an entire racial group that's key to a coalition victory is a pretty bad idea. In the
pretty
last
bad idea.
Fucking election, yeah.
So I mean, I still put it below Texas, and when we get to Nebraska in terms of likelihood in my own mind, but it's certainly higher than it was before. And I don't know. I would love to see some new numbers out of that state. Because if there's one state that the Puerto Rico stuff is going to impact more than any other.
Well, and Scott,
don't worry, we'll see some new
it.
numbers on Tuesday. Yeah. Oh yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Senator Rick Scott clearly was worried about it because he right away was like, "No, I've been to Puerto Rico a lot. They're nice people," and
That tweet gave the vibes of oh no, you misheard. My uncle did not just say a racial slur. It's
right.
No, it's fine. We love Puerto Rico. Everything's cool. Don't worry. It's fine. There was a real panic that set in after that, and I guess for good reason. Holy shit, don't do that.
Yeah, I think in general, don't pick out one entire population of people and criticize them.
So let's briefly move into the Hopium part of our interview today. What about these takes that there's some kind of hidden Kamala landslide waiting to happen? I read a piece last night about an outfit by an outfit called Vantage Data House. Have not heard of them, but that's a legit sounding name. They've got a nice website. Entitled "The Blowout No One Sees Coming," which argues that a combination of Dobbs, Trump, and the decline of split ticket voting and huge margins for candidates like Josh Stein for governor in North Carolina and Ruben Gallego for U.S. Senate in Arizona and other factors indicate that we're going to have sort of a 2018 or 2012 style blue wave. Do you think there's any merit to that?
Blue wave, no. Is there a world where Kamala Harris wins all of the swing states? Yes. So I read what you sent me on this, and they have Harris up by 4 in Florida. That seems
feels sus.
Yeah, suspect. Sus, as the kids would say. I'm not a kid, so I don't say that. That seems suspect to me. I mean, the other thing is, I looked all over that website to find their methodology, and I couldn't find it. So
they could be using panels of Indian.
They might have just asked each other.
Exactly. So, I mean, listen, I give them credit. They are putting it themselves out there. So
right.
They clearly believe it. I hope they're right. I would much rather them be right and me be wrong and have a huge blue landslide and win everywhere. But listen, and I think we're going to get into this. I do actually think that if there is a polling error this cycle, it's more likely to slightly underestimate Harris than the other way around. So, I think a world where Harris wins the popular vote by 4 points and, wins all of the 6 swing states and gets close-ish in Florida and Texas, that world exists for sure and is a very realistic world. Some, blue wave 2018 thing is, I think that's very unlikely, although I wish it would happen.
Can you elaborate on that then? Why do you think Kamala might be underperforming in polls?
So, to do this, I need to go back and get a little wonky. If you guys are ready for
Let's get wonky.
Okay.
Get more wonky, baby. Let's go.
All right. So 2016, we all thought Clinton was going to win. I remember sitting in a hotel room at the Westin downtown with a bourbon as the results coming in, wondering A, what was going on with the country, and B, if I'd even have an industry to work in the next day because the polls
oh shit, it was that existential.
Yes, it was very existential, and they were off. And we did a lot of work after 2016 to try to figure out why. And the biggest reason was that for years, pollsters had controlled their sample through sampling and weighting to make sure that we had the right, or what we thought was the right mix of partisanship, age, gender, race, region, but not education, because that was a sort of hard thing to know. We have on the voter file, we know the gender, we know the race in many states, we know the party in party states, we know where they are.
Education, you're relying on people to be telling you the truth.
Right.
And you're relying on pollsters to ask the question to begin with, right?
But that's the bigger, like, it's not that they tell us the wrong thing. It's that the college-educated voters are much more likely to take a poll than non-college voters. So for decades, polls had too many college-educated voters, including 2016, and not enough non-college. But it didn't matter, because if you controlled for those other things, like education didn't impact. But that changed with a vengeance in 2016, right? Like, college-educated voters moved towards Democrats, and non-college moved towards Trump, particularly among white voters. So figured this out, and obviously by this point, we're starting to get much better education models on the file, and so we started weighting based on those education models. The other thing we found is that, like, even though if you had your regions right, population density mattered. So, like, for instance, in Colorado, we break up the state into we put Denver and Boulder County together as sort of the liberal bastions, Arapahoe, Adams, and Jeffco together, which used to be the swing suburbs, now moving more Democratic, than the Colorado Springs market, the Western Slope, and the rest of the Eastern Plains, right? And so we always made sure we had enough, each of those regions was represented correctly. But what turned out in 2016 is that, for instance, in the swing suburbs, Arapahoe, Adams, and Jeffco, we had not enough of the less dense exurbs and too much of the more dense suburbs. So the other thing we started doing was controlling, because we have on the file the census density, population density. So we started controlling for that too. So, and then we said, okay, we've got the problem fixed. 2018 came, polling was super accurate, really good. 2020 came, and it was off again. Not as bad as 2016. In Colorado, our numbers were totally on. In Montana, where I was working for
Kyle Clark called you the most accurate pollster in Colorado. I know you've printed the tweet out and it's on your wall.
That was 22. We'll get there.
Okay,
but yes, I do. I actually have behind me is a photo that my mother-in-law made of Kyle Clark saying that on the air with, like, the quote underneath it, and it's like rounds. She made me the goat pollster photo, which I love you very much. Kathy listens to your show. I want to give Kathy Daly shout out. Kathy. Best mother-in-law, great photographer if anybody needs it. Calls me the goat. I love it. But yes, so 2020. But in Colorado, the polling was accurate in places like Montana and in Michigan, other places, more blue collar places, white non-college places. It was off. So what we did, we joined with 4 other major Democratic pollsters to do this big project in Wisconsin, where we called very creatively the Wisconsin Project, where we went there, and most of our polls are phone, text, online. So we did polls we did that, but then we also mailed voters a survey, and then we sent some voters. We mailed them and told them if they took it, we would give them $5. And then we also sent people house to house, like George Gallup used to do back in the day. So, basically the more effort to try to reach people that don't usually take polls, because what we found in 2020, and sorry, I should take a step back. What was wrong in 2020 was that we had the right number of Democrats, Independents, Republicans, but our independents were too anti-Trump, or Republicans were too anti-Trump. What we found was Trump voters are less, trustworthy of everybody, less likely to take polls. So you have enough Republicans, but you're getting a lot of Romney anti-Trump Republicans, and that was the problem. So we did this big project to try to figure out, to look at these, the folks that'll take a poll when you knock on their door versus what you won't. And we found 2 things. One, this was not part of the project, but we found we also were doing in 2020. Was we were asking people how they voted in 2016, but we were not waiting on that. You might have read
this recalled vote, right?
Mm-hmm. And what we found is if we had been waiting, we went back and reweighted our surveys based on that. It would have been significant. Like, for instance, in Montana, we had bullet tied. If we had reweighted on that, we would have had it down 6. So we found that. So that was one change. But the other thing we found in this Wisconsin project is that we threw a shit ton of questions on these polls to try to figure out what correlated with this non-response bias, is what it's called. And there's a question which is, how important is politics to your personal identity, right? And if you say yes on that, you're much more likely to take a poll. You're also much less likely to be a Trumper. So in addition to doing the recall vote, what we then did was a big national survey that included door-to-door interviews to create a model on the voter file that predicts, so I can look up the chance that Ian Silveri thinks that politics is important to his personal identity, which I know is 100% on the file. It probably says something like 90%, right? But so that gives us a target that we can weight surveys to, and we weight surveys. So we always, and sample. So now we are getting more of those folks that are not as engaged in politics, and we're making sure we have enough Trump people. So there's a big debate over this. Nate Cohn, who I am a fan of, the New York Times, wrote an article about this, sort of criticizing that approach, or at least questioning it. he says that their polls are more accurate, they think, without it. We disagree. Like like for the longest time, I actually thought that waiting on this was a bad idea because people lie. They tend to want to say they voted for the winner, but
yeah, they also like misremember, which is insane.
Right, exactly.
Like I don't know how you could possibly think you voted one way when you definitely voted the other, but that's apparently the science.
Right, but most people are not crazy people like us that think about politics all day, Ian, right? Like so. But in the Trump era, these things don't the Trumpers are not going to lie and say Biden just because Biden won, right? And people are not forgetting now. So, and that we've seen that is that there are panels out there that recorded who voted what, and then they look at like this question now matched up to what they said back then, and it's consistent. We also see that people that say they voted for Trump might be voting for Harris and vice versa. So it's not like, the criticism of waiting to this is that you're just going to move the numbers to whatever they were in 2020. And to be clear, when we're waiting to this, we're not waiting to the numbers in 2020. We look at how populations have changed too and wait to a projection of what we think how we think the current electorate voted in 2020. So for instance, like in Nevada, the electorate has gotten more Republican for various reasons. So our projection of what we wait to in 2020 was worse than what Biden actually got, right? But we also see that that right now in a place like Nevada, like Trump is doing better than his recall vote, and so that shows you that people who are telling the truth about who they voted for, but then voting differently. So we'll see how this all turns out. Like I feel like everything we've done suggests that this should correct for the problems of 2020. I also think that
because when you go and do the same thing and plug it into historical surveys, it corrects the error and correctly predicts the outcome within the margin.
The error goes away, right? And so I also think there's the reason I think, and getting back to the original question of why I think there's a chance the polls might underestimate Harris, is that I think there probably has been some kind of overcorrection. One of the other thing to keep in mind, right, is people sort of that don't know about polling. One of the things they think is just like margin of error, and the bigger survey you have, the lower margin of error, and you're good. But that's not it. Like there are so many other sources of error, right? In terms of, first of all, in an election, you have to project who's going to turn out, right? If we're polling registered voters, we know what they look like, but we don't know who's going to turn out. So you have to make some projections about who's going to have to turn out to vote, which we do based on turnout models and past turnout and things like that. But also there's this non-response issue, right? So if you're doing the methodology wrong and you're not doing some of the, you're going to get, only 10, 15 years ago, 25% of people answered polls, but now it's like 5%. And it's not consistent. If it were consistent across everything, it wouldn't matter. But, educated people, anti-Trumpers are more likely to take a survey than non-educated people more involved in politics are. So you have to correct for that. So, there are all these sort of sources of error. And we spend a lot of time trying to figure this out. And so, but we are being small at GSG, small C conservative on our projections, not going crazy, but so for instance, if we project, that we think the electorate of Colorado, should be +4 on party registration, we might model that at +2.5, just to be small C conservative, especially given what we've seen the last time. Also, we think it's better if you're working for a Democratic candidate to sort of underestimate their support than overestimate, so we'd rather err on that side. But in terms of public pollsters, I also think that a lot of them are still scarred from 2020, so they may be pushing number. And you certainly see this. There's also herding going on, if you've heard of that. You see all these numbers come out in swing states, and they're all even +1, -1. If it should be,
how fucking useful is this anyway? I mean, this is
it should
part
be
of the
anywhere between
projection.
-2 and +4. If was up, so there are definitely public pollsters that are pushing their numbers to what they think it should be.
Then why fucking do it? Why spend $80,000 or whatever to do a survey if you're just gonna cook the book so that it looks like everything else?
And that's one I give the New York Times, I give credit. They put out some numbers. They had terrible numbers in Texas, for instance, which I don't believe they're that bad, but they got those numbers and they put them out. They're not hurting that, which is what they should do. And certainly what we'd it's not good for our clients. We're not going to, if our client, we get a bad poll at the end of the day, we're not going to necessarily release that publicly, but we're going to give it to our client and tell them what it looks like. And sometimes we get these numbers back and we look at it under the hood and we're we think this is an outlier, but we'll give them the numbers and we'll say, yep, this is not looking as good. This has you down 3 when we were just up 1. we don't think we've really lost that ground. We think this is more like down 1 maybe, but these are the numbers, and we're gonna tell you what they are. And here's why we think it might be an outlier, right? And that's what you should do. And some pollsters do that, but a lot of them don't. And which is, I agree, like why do it if you don't? But after 2020, I get the psychology of it.
I'm going to play a clip from Harry Enton of CNN here from last night talking about sort of a polling miss or a possible Kamala landslide. I want you to take a listen and then react to it for us.
Is that Harris, simply put, is more popular than Donald Trump. Her net favorable rating is higher than Trump. She's at -2. Trump's at -7. I went all the way back since 1956 and looked at the polls. Does the more popular candidate usually win? The answer is absolutely yes. 16 times the more popular candidate has won. Only one time the less popular candidate has won. I will note that was Donald Trump back in 2016. But of course, remember, Hillary Clinton was quite unpopular herself. But the bottom line is this. Kamala Harris has been consistently more popular in the polls than Donald Trump is. She's consistently had a higher net favorable rating than Donald Trump. And normally, usually, the candidate who's more popular goes on to win on Election Day.
Democrats are fond of that saying, forget the polls, when we vote, we win.
Yes.
And you see something in that.
Absolutely. Let's take a look at the special elections, right? Democrats in special elections, their performances the last 2 years. What has happened? We're looking at state legislative and federal special elections. On average, these Democrats have surpassed Joe Biden's 2020 margin by 2 points. By 2 points. And remember, Joe Biden won. So the fact that these Democrats have been doing better than Joe Biden's been doing is a good sign. Historically speaking, there is correlation between how folks do in the special elections, especially in this polarized era, and how folks do eventually in the presidential election. It was actually one of the warning signs last time around in 2020, where Democrats really weren't doing that great in special elections, despite the polls saying that Joe Biden was going to win rather easily. It suggested Trump would do better on Election Day. This time around, the special elections are suggesting the opposite, that in fact Joe Biden, because Democrats have been exceeding Joe Biden's margin, that maybe Democrats will actually do better than the polls have been.
So 2 things to react to there. The sort of idea about net favorability ratings. Kamala had a positive net favorability rating for much of September. It's now gone upside down, but it's very, very close. It's less than 1 point negative on net. And then these like sort of landslidey special election results on the congressional level. Think Tom Suozzi in New York, Pat Ryan in New York, and then all the way down to some state legislative blowouts that were pretty surprising. Anything in there to give us a little bit of hopium walking into next week?
Yes, but let's qualify that. And first of all, going back to my, yes, I have to call back to my A4 NERP conferences because I met Harry Enton at one of those several years ago. So he's a good guy. Like him a lot. He's smart. So let me talk about the specials stuff first. And this is one of the other reasons I think that the polls may underestimate Kamala is the specials. But the other thing that's really useful to look at is the Washington state primary, because they have a nonpartisan election where everybody votes in the same primary, and you can sort of add up the D versus NR votes, and that has often been a good predictor of how the general election will look. And like in 2020 sort of as Harry was saying about the specials, it was sort of projecting something that would be very closer to the polls. If you look at that and you look at all the specials and you look at how much those have correlated to the general election in the past, and if it were the same this year, that would predict a Democratic House. And this is the important thing. It's usually been a good predictor of the overall national House margin of D+3 is what you would predict on the generic ballot, which sounds about right to me. And sometimes you see that but a lot of these polls that have it close have it more even, or even like R+1, which I don't think is likely to be the case nationally. So that is an argument that the polls are underestimating Harris a little bit. Now, that doesn't mean Harris will win by 3, because sometimes the generic ballot has been better than her numbers. Now, the counter argument here is that I don't know how much trust you can take into the specials. One of the things that we have seen, right, is that with the sort of partisan realignment, college-educated voters have become more D, and non-college-educated voters have become more R. And in special elections, which are low-turnout affairs, that means that the folks that are most likely to turn out in low-turnout elections have become much more Democratic, right? And so in a low-turnout election, that favors Ds. And this is different than it used to be. Like low-turnout voters were more Ds. We wanted the highest turnout possible. But now it's like reverse. And so in a huge turnout presidential election, those voters, like the D voters that voted in all the specials, they're going to vote. But a lot of the Trump voters that didn't, they're going to vote too. And now some of these projections that Harry's talking about take that into account. Are they taking it into account enough? I don't know. Like I don't put a ton. I put some, but not a ton of trust in those special elections being. I put more in the Washington because that's a primary, still lower turnout election, but it's not as low as like an April special election that nobody votes in, right? So I do think something's there, but I would definitely qualify your hopium. I do not, I've heard a lot of people say, don't trust, you see this on, you see the poll haters on Twitter, and obviously I'm biased. And
like,
listen,
no one ever called me, polls are fake.
Right.
It's like, Jesus Christ.
And listen, I'll be the first to admit, polling is really hard. We got some stuff wrong in 2016, 2020. We try to be accountable about it, but like these folks, go on there, it's like, yeah, trust any polls, but look at the specials, only trust that. And it's just like, well, no, because we've actually did an analysis of that too. And like, in the Dem margin in a lot of these specials is like very highly correlated to the turnout differential margin. Like in Swazi's district, who overperformed, he overperformed because Dems turned out and Republicans didn't, not because he convinced swing voters to vote D. I mean, there was a little bit of that too, for sure. I don't want to. Swazi ran a good campaign, but the biggest thing was this differential in turnout, which is not going to exist, even at least at that level in the presidential election. So there's something there. But let's not put all of our hopes in that basket.
Can you give our listeners a bit of an insider's approach as they sit down to watch election results on Tuesday? I want to break this out into 3 sections, but what should they be following? What should they be ignoring? Let's start with House majority. What are you looking for to get an early indication?
Well, the first thing I'll say is, I remember the last 2 big elections, Florida starts reporting very quickly, and that looked really bad for us.
That's when I started freaking out. I was sitting at the desk at 9 News live watching us get the shit kicked out of us in Florida, being like, this does not feel great, y'all.
No. So don't overreact to Florida sucks. Hopefully Florida, as we talked about, if Florida is looking good, that is a good sign. If Florida sucks, obviously.
But you also get North Carolina and Georgia at the same time, right?
So that starts coming in around the same time. I think a little bit later usually. And I would. But the other thing is, and I need to do some thinking, looking at online to figure out what this looks like. This was the case in 2020, 2022. I think it'll be the case. There are states will have what's called the red shift and the blue shift because they count different ballots first, right? And so. And in 2020, of course, the early vote, the absentee vote, the mail vote was heavily Democratic, partially because COVID, Democrats voted by mail, and the Republicans' Messiah was telling them that mail was a tool of the devil, so they didn't. One of the things that's important to look at when we're talking about early vote this year is that that's not the case, right? There's a lot of numbers out there that show Republicans doing better in the early vote than they did in 2020. I'm not saying that doesn't mean anything, but it can or it can't, because now Republicans are trying to get their people.
They're just trying to catch up to where
right, and there are more Democrats that are going to vote election. So if you look at, and we've looked at this, so what you can't do is just look at the overall numbers and say, oh my God, the early vote is 10 points more Republican than it was in 2020. That we have to do is look at is who's turning out. Is it are infrequent voters, and when did they turn out in 2020? And so what we're seeing in a lot of places is that there are a lot of very frequent Republican voters that voted on Election Day in 2020 that are voting earlier this time. So they're moving their vote up, but they're not new voters. In some places, when you look at the early voting, and there's some good news, I think, in Michigan and Pennsylvania on this front, that there are more infrequent Democrats coming out early than infrequent Republicans. You look at the numbers in Nevada, where there's a lot of concern about, it is a lot of shifting things forward for Republicans, so it's not nearly as bad as it looks, but it's also not awesome. So I'm not saying that any early vote, you can't say it means good things for Republicans, because it can, but you have to look at that more. But this also gets to your question, Jason, which is still mail voting is still going to be more heavily Democratic, though less so than 2020. So in some states, they process those beforehand and start counting them early. In some states, like Pennsylvania, Republicans passed laws to prevent that purely because they wanted to fuck with people's, they wanted to make it seem like there was this crazy blue shift at the end, and they're trying to undermine confidence in the election.
Yeah, they got that little graph with the big straight line going up, and you're like, nothing in nature works this way.
And let's be clear, these are terrible people. They did this specifically to undermine confidence in elections. They are awful, terrible people. But so let's say Pennsylvania, you would expect the numbers to start out more Republican and then get more Democrat, whereas in states where you count the early vote early, you'd expect them to be more Democratic and then get more Republican. So you really, and I don't have offhand which states are which, other than I remember Pennsylvania. So that's really important to think about and understand. So So the New York Times has the needle, which creates a lot of PTSD. But it's a great tool because they factor all of this in. Like they factor in, like, what do they expect? The early vote. They look at different places, and also you have some states like the rural areas come in first, and then the cities come in later. So if you're just looking at the overall numbers in Georgia, so the needle takes all this into account. Like, so when a dump of votes comes in, it's like this is an early vote from a rural state. So Harris is down 20 here, but actually she, if she were down 25, she'd be on track to win. So then it moves the needle towards her, right? So that's a good way, to just like a one-stop shop to sort of be looking at, like, how do things look? And listen, they can move. Like last cycle, it was in 2020, it was tilting R, and then Georgia came in, and it all of a sudden flipped to like 60% Biden. So like, even at the beginning, don't freak. This is the biggest thing. Don't freak out, good or bad, based on early vote stuff or first returns. Like you can watch, look at the needle, look at what's happened previously, think about all these things, but let the votes come in a little bit before drawing conclusions.
What about specifically for like Senate or president? If you're at a watch party with your girlfriend and you want to impress her with your knowledge and you see some number pop up and you say, well, that probably means that the Democrats are going to hold the Senate or whatever. Like, are there any of those things?
This feels like personal dating advice that you're asking.
Well, I mean, so this is it's funny you said that, because in 2016, before I was up in the hotel room drinking a bourbon, thinking I didn't have a job, my wife she does some Democratic politics stuff. She was hosting a party at the West End, and I was sort of in my command room looking with other data geeks, like looking at the data. And I remember when Macomb County came in. That's when I knew it was over. Like Macomb County came in big for Trump.
Where's that?
That's in Michigan. Okay. Sorry, it's a blue collar suburb of Detroit. It's traditionally been Democratic, but has been has been moving. It started in 2016, really moved towards the Republicans, and that came in way bigger for Trump than we anticipated. And like already the numbers were not looking great, and that's when that came in. And I remember going down and finding Janet and telling her, like, we're going to lose. And she was just like, she was watching, and everybody just watching CNN, and she's like, what? And that's when I knew. So look for Macomb County. But I think, I think North Carolina will probably be, although it's hard to say, like because of Robinson there, if it looks like she's going to win North Carolina, then I'm going to feel pretty damn good. Mm-hmm. But you can't take it to the bank because the Robinson, everybody doesn't know Mark Robinson, the lieutenant governor, really, really upstanding gentleman, went on porn sites and posted. Apparently, there are porn sites where you can also post on message boards. I didn't know this.
None of us knew this. I don't think anyone did.
How he was a black Nazi. So all sorts of. I mean, he's like a real so he's going to lose by a lot. And the question is, what kind of reverse coattails will that have? And I don't think I think it'll be some, but not a ton. But so I think North Carolina is one of the states that reports earlier. And if that's looking good, same with Georgia, looking at some of those places, like Ohio will tell, Ohio isn't really important for the Senate. Sherrod Brown, I think will win, but it's like, it's going to be close. And that is a state where partisanship could overcome that, so looking at how Sherrod Brown's doing. But for the Senate, we're going to have to hold Sherrod Brown and then either hold Montana or win one of Nebraska, Texas, or Florida, right? So I don't think there's going to be one bellwether in the Senate. I think in the House, how we're doing in New York, we need to win several seats in New York, not just a couple. There are a couple seats in Virginia that Virginia gets called pretty early too, and that's I remember in 2018, sitting at Jason Crow's events as the numbers were coming in, and first some of the numbers that didn't look really good, and I was like, oh man, this isn't going to be a bad night. But Virginia started coming in. We won. There were 3 seats in Virginia that were. Right. I think one we were supposed to win, one was a toss-up, and one that was like a long shot. We won all 3. And that's when I was like, this is going to be a good night. So Virginia is also one I'd be looking at.
So last thing before we let you go, we have created the official Get More Smarter podcast 270 to win Electoral College map. And when I say we, I mean me, without consulting Jason at all whatsoever. So this is sort of like my prediction for election night with if you put a gun to my head and made me bet the farm, what I would pick, right? So we lose North Carolina and Georgia. We win the blue wall states, but we also win Nevada and Arizona. My Nevada prediction is based solely on the fact that they have not voted for a Republican since 2004. And though it's been narrowing, I think your client, Jackie Rosen, is doing an excellent job running a great campaign. I think she's got some coattails there. And then in Arizona, Kari Lake is just collapsing, and Ruben Gallego is amazing. And I have a really hard time imagining like a very large number of Gallego Trump voters, although I could be surprised. What do you think about this? What would you change? Do you think this is a decent representation of a possible reality?
It's certainly a possible reality. I would flip Arizona and Nevada red. I just don't see Gallego having huge coattails. Nevada and Arizona, just of the 6 states, that Arizona and Nevada are the ones that I feel most.
You just want it to be tied.
I do not. Trust me, I do not. Because that will mean bloodshed in a very real way, and I don't want that. In Nevada, this is very weird. We have had that Senate race much closer. The public polls have had Jackie up high single digits, and we never have. We have it close. Like, she could lose. I don't think she will. I think she will win. This is another place. We talked about Colorado. Like, if you got some money you want to throw to Senate race, throw it to Jackie Rosen, because
really,
it's closer than you think. I think she'll win. Listen, if Harris wins Nevada, then Jackie will win easily.
Right.
But I think Harris likely loses Nevada by a couple of points, and then Jackie wins by a few points. But it's close, and so I would put those red. I am going to be optimistic and put North Carolina blue. I would move that blue along with the blue wall state. So I have not actually thought about this. I should have if I had. It was obvious you were going to ask me this, but so this is my first time thinking about it. Yeah. This is my official prediction. So when I get this wrong, you can come back and yell at me, is that Harris holds the blue wall states and adds North Carolina, but loses Georgia, Nevada, and Arizona.
And then it doesn't matter because she's in the clear. I mean, North Carolina has 16 electoral college votes to Arizona's 11, Nevada's 6. She can lose both. If she wins the blue wall states and loses all of them, she still wins, but
Correct.
It's close. Versus if she picks up North Carolina, then it's a much clearer victory. Well, Andrew Baumann, pollster of the pod, good buddy, and prognosticator extraordinaire. We have learned absolutely nothing new from this conversation with you, but we really appreciate it.
It was a good use of time.
If that's the case, then that's on you. I was spectacular, and you're just a dumb fuck. So, I mean, that's your fault.
Thank you so much for coming back on the show, man. We'll see you on election night.
All right. Thank you, my friends. Have a good one.
Go fight, win.
All right.